Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever's watching this, wherever you are, whenever you are. My name is Justin Victor, and I'm a certified neuroacoustic sound therapist. And this video is a response to the presentation I did at the beginning of March 2025 at the Herbal Mama Health Fair in Edmonton. And I wanted to put out a separate video because the quality wasn't where I wanted it to be and the whole video didn't get put out. So this is going to be kind of a quick rundown about what that presentation was about. And I'm informing regarding stress and actually how you can remove it from your life, balance it in a way, the chronic stress, to actually get more out of the modalities that you're utilizing already. Lifestyle factors, everything. So if you're interested, stay with me till the end. I'm going to be sticking to some basic points and keeping it as concise as possible. And then you can reach out to me afterwards if you're interested in learning more. So I actually preceded my talk, the bulk of it, with this, thanking people for their time already, because essentially we only have so much of this finite currency in our lives, and not too many people give a lot of thought, from when I've experienced it myself and when I'm with other people, about how actually you're using that time that you're never going to get back. And so essentially, with stress being such an incredibly pervasive part of our world, the relaxation and stress responses, I want to make sure with what I'm doing with my modality that I can help people get the most out of the limited amount of time that they have here. And so I'm very grateful that you took the time to tune into this presentation, which I hope this doesn't scare you off. You're never going to get that back. But I do hope that this is informative and you find it helpful for your own health journey. And so what this looks like today is a very brief rundown about me, the nervous system, and bio-tuning, the modality that I'm pioneering here in Canada. Now, this has been around for quite a few years, but I am one of the main people in Canada working with neuroacoustics, and currently the only Lambda Bio-Tuning practitioner in Canada. I am a degreed geologist with a background in chemical engineering, and that's another story, which is why I wrote a book, among other things, in that material. And I also, of course, I am a certified neuroacoustic sound therapist, and I'll explain exactly what that means later on. But that's one of the numerous hats that I wear. Others being as a spiritual conduit, channeling entities for information from the divine for those that are seeking that information. I have a background in traditional Chinese medicine with Touch for Health and applied kinesiology along with visceral work and manipulation, and I incorporate a lot of that into my practice. And then I do have a certification with reconnective healing, and that's something that I offer as well. We're going to touch briefly on this concept of the nervous system. Essentially, it's how we interface with the world, how we perceive the world around us, and then how we respond to it, which is non-separate from the stress response and our quality and quantity of life. In some ways, stress has almost become an untouchable subject, which I'll talk about more later, because everyone is stressed in different ways, shapes, and forms. There's a lot of misunderstandings around it, which is why I have to spend a lot of my time educating and connecting with people on that level to make sure they understand it. So if you know about the autonomic nervous system already, which you probably do, you just may not know the name, then feel free to skip ahead. My work with bio-tuning is revolving around the sympathetic fight or flight response and the parasympathetic rest and digest, which is how I usually introduce it, because people have usually heard of that. But if you haven't, these systems work synergistically in the body to respond to events, in the case of the fight or flight response, to what may or may not be a life or death stressor. But even if it's not, if it's just a perceived stressor, the body responds the same way. And it's very pervasive throughout the body, even innervating all the hairs on the arms and the legs. All of those little hairs in there have nerve fibers going into them, and so it's very spread out throughout the body. Whereas with the rest and digest, it's quite a bit more contained to specific areas, which I won't go over now. And that is functioning in a lot of ways to help the body recover from the fight or flight responses that are usually supposed to be a sprint. But most people that come in to see me are stuck in that fight or flight, and they're running a marathon for a long time. And we're going to talk more about what that means as well. So what is stress? Well, I find it useful to describe it as any kind of a physiological response to any kind of a stimuli that moves someone away from homeostasis, or that homeostasis being the balance point, the happy place, the inner climate of the body. And essentially what that translates to is uncertainty. The body has to have a response to what might happen. Because if we're moved out of homeostasis, we need to have these responses to bring us back into balance for when that stressor is over. Now, marketed stress relief is transitioning. They don't so much demonize stress anymore, from what I've seen, which is great, although some of that might still be out there, as in demonizing that fight or flight response. But it's a misinterpreting of it, and I kind of think of it as kind of moving into a scam territory, primarily because of that lack of information. There is this misconception about the parasympathetic rest and digest response being associated with healing, which isn't entirely correct, and I'll go into that. How I like to phrase it is it's actually what stress relief is designed for, a dissolving of the resistance to returning to zero stress. The body should be able to go in and out of both of these, fight or flight, rest and digest on its own. And so I wrote about that in a Substack article, free Substack. You're welcome to check it out and subscribe. I publish maybe every month, month and a half on there in an educational format that's very readable, understandable, about a variety of health and metaphysical topics. So these are the myths that are associated with the stress response. So I talked about this briefly, but there's this idea that there's an antagonism of the autonomic nervous system, as in that fight or flight versus the rest and digest. But actually, a lot of these tissues that the stress response and that relaxation response are innervating or connected to, they're actually working synergistically together. And there are very few tissues in the body, different systems, muscles, organs, where it's antagonistic. It's one versus the other. So they work really cohesively. And so it's difficult to educate people when they have this idea in their mind about how we need to have one versus the other. And I mentioned this as well, the parasympathetic aspect, which we talked about as the rest and digest. That is for recovering from that fight or flight response, to do maintenance activity to help you with secreting enzymes to break down your foods, move foods throughout the GI tract, and so on, to help you recover from that respond activity. It's actually a zero stress point in between that fight or flight and rest and digest where you have to be for healing. It's a prerequisite. And this is what I mean about how there's a misinterpretation of the stress response, because this is never talked about. And this last thing about lowercase good versus uppercase good. I do a lot of stress monitoring, free sessions in my office, 30-minute stress monitoring. And when I'm hooking people up, it's just to have the information so people know exactly what's going on in their body compared to what it is that they feel. And oftentimes when I have people hooked up and connected and I'm seeing this fight or flight activity, that's all I see. But yet when I'm asking them how they feel while that's going on, I'm good, I'm okay. Good doesn't mean good. And essentially they're out of tune with what relaxation and zero stress actually feels like. And so it's my job to bring people back to that. And I will talk more about that later on in the presentation. So with bio-tuning, I'm really focusing on removing the uncertainty from the process of healing, because I bring people to the place of zero stress where you have to be to heal, for the body to work on its list, which I'm going to talk about soon. There can be a lot of uncertainty in this process for wherever you're at, whatever's going on. Am I doing everything right? Am I actually in the place where I'm getting everything that I need out of all the good stuff that I'm already doing for my body? By actually measuring the stress response, seeing it on the screen, and finding a frequency that balances the entire stress response, we can remove some of that uncertainty. I'm sure there's going to be some for a lot of people with how long is this going to take? What's going to happen next? When is this going to get resolved? And that's okay. We need to be able to settle into this though, this healing place. And we can't do that if we're always on edge, always anxious about what might be happening with that healing behind the scenes in our body. And so this is why I wanted to talk about uncertainty. It's essentially whatever it is that we are not perceiving at this present moment. It's everything outside of that. That's how life works though. If we were facing no uncertainty, everything was certain, it wouldn't be lifelike. That's what makes life the adventure. But the opportunity is that there is, of course, that anxiety around it, and how any kind of a future event that hasn't happened yet and likely will never happen could endanger our lives, could put an end to our lives. So we have to be able to work with uncertainty, and we have to be able to embrace it and allow it to work through us, just as we don't know how that healing process happens in the body, but it's there. Anything from a cut to accepting a new organ, all of that, we don't have to think about how that works. That's uncertainty as well, and we have a certain amount of trust that we place in it. And so when you're with me, or with any therapist for that matter, that uncertainty can come down a little bit, because you can generally ask us anything about the modality that we're working with you, or anything health related, and we'll do our best to answer, and so we can have a response there for you. The thing is, when you go out on your own, when you go home where you spend most of your time, then that can kind of creep back in, because you might be able to reach back out to the therapist, but it's a lot of, okay, well, what do I do now? What now? With my work, I don't want people going back and asking what now. So I create soundtracks to give to people. So there's no what now. This is now what? You have your track to balance the stress response. And this is what bio-tuning is utilizing as part of its procedure and working with the whole body's healing response. And so then the anxiety creeps in with uncertainty about how we are projecting into some amount of future possibility that, like I said, it hasn't happened yet and likely will never happen, but we're not here. And so I wrote this article about dissolving anxiety. I cured my anxiety. I'm saying this for myself, curing it for me, because I found a technique that actually was able to get rid of 100% of my anxiety, and I needed nothing other than my present moment awareness. So briefly, if you don't want to read the article, the essence of it is that if you are in the present moment, there is no uncertainty for you to project your awareness into. You know what you're experiencing right now. You know you're hearing my voice, you're looking at the screen and everything else around you. There is no uncertainty in there about what might happen. It's happening now. And so essentially, having that mantra, the present moment awareness, is what got rid of my anxiety. Now there's more to it after that. There's a lot more to resolving it, but essentially that's how I was able to overcome that. But there is another wave of anxiety that comes up even after that, if it's been stuck there for a long enough time. So I encourage you to check that out. So when I'm explaining bio-tuning to my clients, I talk about this idea of the list. And so basically, you are the client in this case, of course, but then if we're looking at your body, it's the accountant. It's keeping track of anything and everything that you're concerned about health-wise and more. It doesn't really matter what it is. Everything that is going on in your body that is out of balance is accounted for by the body. It knows. And so this list is compiled initially of two lists. There's the everyday maintenance activity that needs to happen. The trillions of cells that are born and die need to be fed and remove the waste from. That's one part of the list, just to get you from day to day, to keep you going. And then oftentimes there's a second list that's created of injuries. And I don't just mean physical, that's a part of it, but mental, emotional, spiritual, toxins, everything that's a consequence of living a less optimal lifestyle than one might need to be in a perfect state of health. And so those become combined over time. And this is what gives rise to this master list. And so there is no modality or therapist I know of that will be able to hit the number one thing on that list every single time you come in to see them. How are they going to know? The odds of that, it's just not even worth thinking about. And even if they did manage to do that every single time, you're not spending your life with a therapist. You have your own life to live. As much as I'm awesome and the work that I do is cool, you have a life to live outside of a treatment or therapy room that you need to be able to take advantage of for your healing. That's where the majority of it happens. So that's why this is important about sending my clients home with something where I can actually have them continue this process on their own. And this is what it looks like. Now, this is a static screenshot from one of my past bio-tuning sessions. The main windows are the top three. So how this works is I'm using sensors on the wrists, and that is bringing in the heart rate. So you see that in the top middle window. and you have a green statistical normal zone. And that heart rate is being converted by the software to the heart rate variability, which is just how much it deviates up and down from a straight horizontal line. And that heart rate variability is connected to that fight or flight, rest and digest response of the autonomic nervous system. And that's what allows me to see all this other data. So in the top left window, you're seeing the blue and the green. The blue is that fight or flight response that most people are stuck in, and I'm essentially trying to move them out of that. And the green is the rest and digest activity. So I can see this activity in real time and give people feedback afterwards, helping them relate, like I said, what they feel to what's actually going on. And there is 99% of the time just a gigantic disconnect. And that's really disempowering, because not only are all of these systems being impacted negatively when you're in this chronic stress response, digestion, learning, immunity, memory, you can't heal, you can't digest your foods, you can't move forward through your day without getting overwhelmed in different ways. But most people, they don't even know what's happening. Now you'll notice when that blue comes down to a minimum and the green comes down to a minimum, it forms a point essentially. And at that point between the two, that is the zero stress point. And that is where all the energy that would have been going into the fight or flight or rest and digest response is sitting in the body. But it's not idle. It's got the list to work on. And so essentially what I'm doing for the first session with Bio-Tuning is I'm finding a precise frequency down to 6 decimal places that brings someone to that zero stress point. And I do that with a sound sweep of frequencies over 2 octaves through a sound table, so a massage table retrofitted with speakers or transducers underneath, synchronized with headphones, because the body hears differently than the ears do. And while this sound sweep is going on, I'm looking at all this data, and the software will capture the frequency that brings someone to zero stress, or in the case of those that really are just so triggered they can't get there, to a close approach. No matter where someone's at, there's always a place to work from. And so that can be a terrifying thing to do. If you've been stuck in this blue fight or flight response for years or decades, like a lot of my clients have, why would you let go? You're with someone for a session that you don't know what to expect. You've just met this person and you're having this wave of frequencies move throughout your body. Why would you let go to zero stress? Not only because it's a novel environment, but if I let go of this response that's been keeping me heightened for years, I could have an experience that would kill me in the next moment. I'd be caught off guard, right? And so essentially it can take some time to get there. But once the system gets closer and closer and goes through it, it realizes that that's the safe place. It remembers that, and it'll do it again and again and again. And that's what carries you forward in your healing process when you're not seeing me for sessions. You take this track into the real world with you, and I'll explain how that works too. And in the top right window, there's a green box with this track moving around it, that path essentially with that dot. And that's dots moving throughout the session. The green box is showing me the normal average energy. The energy meaning the ability to do work, essentially. To move your body, to digest your foods, to have that stress response, relax response, to heal. And I usually like to see people on the top right of that green box or even a little bit higher, but anywhere in there is okay. It's a good place to start from. And so that dot is moving around throughout the session, which I'll show in a live video soon. And essentially it's just showing me the energy being put into the stress response at that time in the session. And then the other 2 windows below, there is a reflection, the blue still being that fight or flight, the green, the rest and digest, and all of this is moving, which you'll see in the video. The red spike is actually related to, among other things, subconscious activity. And so when people are having their sessions, if that red is shooting up into the hundreds or thousands in how it's measured, then people are working on things subconsciously while they're listening. In the back office of the subconscious, 90 to 95% of brain activity back there. They're working on stuff that's holding them back. And when we're working on that, we're moving forward. So there's a lot going on here. And this is what a session looks like. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'll kind of speed through it. I'm just going to turn off the volume there. And so you're seeing the actual pace at which the session proceeds. And this readout is from me listening to a track that I give to people that brought me to zero stress. It's going to be different for each person, but it sounds fairly similar depending on the calculations and what frequency we find. But you're seeing this moving inwards like that. In the top left window, that's it. As soon as we cross over there and we start opening that door back into zero stress, the system starts to remember. And it remembers again and again and again, and it goes through it. That's what I want to see. I want to have the balance between that fight or flight and rest and digest response. And there are a few reasons for that. One, because if I'm switching between them, I'm going through that zero stress place. And that's the prerequisite for all healing. Second, if I'm going to that zero stress point, I'm usually going right through, from stress to relaxation, in and out. If the system's especially triggered, then it might take a few goes to actually go right through. But essentially, that's the second reason. And the third is, as you can see, the more often the system goes there, the more it'll continue to go there again and again on its own, which is where I want people to be when they're living their lives and they're able to actually go through this when they need it, call upon it as they need it. And these sessions can be anywhere. The actual track length themselves can be anywhere from 1 to 30 minutes. And I muscle test the body. I ask the body, how long do you want on this track? What's your brain dominance? I need to know all that information too. And by asking the body, I can again remove some of the uncertainty from it so that the anxiety doesn't creep in and we have people feeling more comfortable and settled into the whole experience. So the layout kind of looks like this. On the first session, I find someone's zero stress frequency. While they're hooked up, there's that sound sweep through the table and headphones, and I find it. Or I find a close approach. Both are okay. There's always a starting point to work from. And once I have that, once we've started to get to that zero stress point, we've effectively broken a stress response that's maladaptive, that's been stuck in that fight or flight or rest and digest for years or decades, and that's holding you back ultimately from your healing and allowing disease to kind of run rampant and develop. After that, the idea is that you can actually heal and you can live life more fully without having the uncertainty about if you're doing things right. Am I getting everything out of my sessions? Now, the other thing I didn't mention was that when you get to the zero stress point, the subconscious mind opens up too. We mentioned that with the red, but when we get to that zero stress point, the subconscious mind opens up and it becomes very malleable. At some point, people might want to erase self-defeating belief systems, which we can do with a certain brainwave state. And the other thing is that when the body's at that zero stress place, then it's more receptive to whatever you're already giving it. Essentially, if you're getting massage or acupuncture, the body has its list. But if it's at a zero stress place and it senses it's getting this good therapy, which doesn't have to be with a therapist, it could be a good diet, supplementation regimen, sleep schedule, the body moves things around as it needs to and says, hey, I have this here, but I'm getting worked on in these systems right now with this therapist. I think I'm going to bump this up a few notches and get this to the top of the list so that it can get worked on here. This is what I mean about getting more out of your therapy, wringing out the stress so that like a sponge, it can actually absorb the therapy instead of being saturated with a chronic stress response. Stress isn't the issue. Chronic stress, unchecked stress, that's where the disease sets in, and it will find the weak points in your body. I don't know the order of the list or what's at number one, but we remove the uncertainty by allowing the body to take care of it. I'm not healing anything. I'm bringing the body back to the zero stress place where it can work on its list best, wherever that might be. Doesn't have to be with me. But essentially, once people have their tracks, they can do that on their own time. So brainwaves are certain speeds of electrical activity across the brain. And they're put into different categories, different speeds essentially, and they're given different names. So to simplify, delta is all physical healing, recuperation, recovery, and deep sleep. Theta is working on the emotional side of things, emotional healing and dreaming, and the emotional healing in dreaming. Alpha is where a lot of the mental healing happens. Beta is a focused attention. And gamma, it's more of a universal focus. So those are the ones that are conventionally recognized by literature. Now that's not enough for me. I actually work with 21. I break delta down into 3, to work on the different levels of physical healing, starting with a Delta 1 to work on the cells, on the energy producing centers, the mitochondria, and inside the cells themselves. And I'm focusing often on healing because that's what people are coming in for, but I can work on anything from enhancing specific abilities like memory and learning in theta delta, IQ and beta alpha, anything like that, and then even high-tech meditation. So I'm going to briefly go through this. Epsilon is associated with metaphysical experiences and out-of-body experiences and spiritual epiphanies. But essentially, the other thing I'll mention before getting into the rest of it is that all of these brainwave states have a healing function, a meditative function, and an everyday function. The same track will do 3 different things without people having to come back for it again. And it's based upon your intention, the body position. So for example, theta, in deep sleep with the emotional healing, that's what's happening down there. But if you're working on a project and listening, it's now amplifying your creative capacities. Or if you're cross-legged in a prayer mudra and you're meditating, it's Christian prayer states and shamanic journeying. Default mode network, or DMN 1 and 2, are associated with 95% of the brain activity and the whole sense of self, which become desynchronized in any kind of a head, body, or full body concussion. So I resynchronize those there. Hypergamma, lambda, and iota are all experimental brainwave states, where hypergamma and lambda are on the faster speeds. And so in that way, it's hypothesized that with these higher brainwave speeds in the upper end of gamma, it's associated with drawing energy into the body. Like you'd imagine monks meditating in the mountains, melting snow around them, pulling energy in from the environment. Very powerful. And then iota, 1 and 2, is on the other end. Really extremely slow frequencies, like 1% of the brain has lit up every second. And these are on the rate of plant respiration. You want to connect with the planet, you want to resonate with its frequencies. This is another way of doing that that's powerful and is not talked about. SMR beta, or sensory motor rhythm beta 1 and 2, are to bring down high anxious racing beta brainwave activity and drowsy theta to put someone in a relaxed focus. ADD, ADHD, OCD, there might be deficiencies there that we can train up. We're training these speeds up like muscle groups. Mu is a specific deficiency in autism and working on social skills and understanding facial expressions and actions. And these last 5 states, they have the 2 names in there, delta epsilon, theta delta. These are borderline states, and we're getting a bit of both. In that way, delta epsilon, the metaphysical epsilon causes behind the physical delta disease. Theta delta has that memory learning, but we're also looking at the emotional causes behind physical diseases. Alpha theta is what a lot of people recognize as the Schumann resonance, being in the flow. Beta alpha, higher activity there, is associated with high IQ, prodigy children. And then gamma beta allows one access to more of a universal focus perspective. The sky's the limit. There's so much we can do. And essentially what the soundtracks look like is this. We have these different frequencies in each ear called binaural beats, and that is what puts us into those brainwave states that I had just showed. So we're training these up like muscle groups, getting them functioning properly again. And it's really important to emphasize that, because once you have that checked off on your list of things to do, the brainwave speed and the stress response with these fundamental frequencies, that's a huge burden to check off of your list of stuff we need to work on. And all you have to do is listen to the track. And then there are 5 octaves of the zero stress frequency, or fundamental frequency, that we've found. An octave above is just double. So if the zero stress frequency is 100, an octave above is 200. And then we have octaves below, halves, 50, 25, 12.5, all designed to bring you to zero stress, but they're resonating different systems in the body. We're massaging the different organ systems and the fluids and the bones and the connective tissues with frequencies designed to bring them to a zero stress healing place. We're resonating them like a wine glass when you hit that resonant frequency or note. And then the last component that's in there are nature sounds, recorded in 3D out in nature. They can help the track sound a little bit more palatable, comfortable for you. because this is only 7 frequencies. The binaural beat frequencies, the 2 of them, along with 5 octaves of the fundamental frequency, it's not going to sound like music, but it's very therapeutically relevant and directed. And so the nature sounds, some of them are slowed down so only the subconscious mind can recognize them. So we're further engaging that activity, encouraging it to participate in this process. So even though you just have these 7 frequencies in the nature sounds, we are bringing the body to that state of zero stress, the prerequisite for all healing. We are accessing the subconscious activity, 95% of the brain activity that's going to be holding us back from our healing. Boxes back there that need to be opened up and worked on, getting the body to start doing that. I'm training up the opposite hemisphere of the strong one. And then there's also the element of training up these brainwave speeds like muscle groups. So a lot's happening and things can happen very quickly, but the emphasis is on listening once or twice a day just to continue forward, especially when you're getting sessions from other therapists. That's the bulk of what I wanted to talk about. If you take nothing from this, please take a moment to digest this. If you can't get to that homeostasis point between the fight or flight, rest and digest, healing becomes inaccessible to you. So we need people to get there, and that's how I scientifically measure and bring people to that point. And if you imagine everything good that you're doing for your body, anything from therapeutic sessions to sleep, supplementation, meditation, diet, you can think of that as the nutrition you're giving for your healing process. Having a balanced stress response is allowing you to digest that. If it is a dysregulated, out of balance, chronically stressed, or chronically relaxed response, you're not absorbing anywhere near as much out of those modalities and what you're doing for yourself that you could be. I really try and emphasize this because people aren't getting the most out of the money and, more importantly, time that you have a very limited amount of that you're spending on them. And like I said, we're wringing out that stress so that we can make room for absorbing the therapy and removing some of the uncertainty about, am I in that place for healing? Can I heal? We visualize that in the screen, we measure it, and we scientifically bring someone there again and again and again. And we let the body return there so that every aspect of your life can be enhanced and optimized. The last couple things I'll mention are this intro to biotuning session. Until I don't have the resources to do it, I offer a free 30-minute stress monitoring session where I just leave you hooked up on the table for about 10 minutes and we have a discussion before and afterwards. And I just measure the stress response like you saw in that video. And that's just information, just to help you relate what it is you feel to what it is that's actually going on in your body. It can be a very enlightening experience having that. And so I think people are entitled to that information, so that's why I do it. And it's a good orientation to help people really understand the significance of what's going on. And as I said at the beginning, thank you again for taking the time to check in and give yourself this valuable information, and even more importantly, taking the time to feel it out, how that resonates with you. And if you are interested in learning more, my website at the bottom is vibrationalinstinct.com. You're welcome to reach out to me by phone. Email is better though, and I look forward to hearing from you. So thank you for joining me, and I hope to hear from you in the future.